Aloha class. So moving on to exercise 6-12, what is the break-even point in units sold and in sales dollars? Without resorting to computations, what is the total contribution margin at the break-even point? So automatically, number 2, I can answer that, right? And so just like our quiz the other day, break-even point means that there's zero profit, which means that contribution margin should be exactly the same as fixed expenses. So automatically I know contribution margin must be equal to fixed expenses if I'm breaking even. So looking at this income statement, that contribution margin should be $216,000 to have zero profit. So I didn't resort to computations. It's $216,000. That's what my contribution margin would have to be to break even. And now we're going to break even. Oh, I didn't type that in, but I can type that in here. So 450,000, 180,000, 270. Oh, that's just a calculation, right? And 216,000. And we can minus that to get our net operating income. $30 per unit, $12, $18. And that's a computation as well. Okay, and did they say how many they were selling? No, they didn't tell me how many they're selling, but I could probably figure that out right now. They sold a total amount of $450,000, and the per unit was $30 per unit, so they must have been selling 15,000 units, right? And so just being able to think through those relationships, I could double check that. If they sell every item for $30, there's 15,000 items, I'd be making $450,000. So yes, that's fine. Break-even point. So break-even point on a unit amount and a sales dollar amount. So we would do our fixed expenses over the unit contribution margin, and then our fixed expenses divided by the unit, the contribution margin ratio for the total sales dollars. So right now my contribution margin per unit would be 18, and my fixed expenses are 216,000. 216,000, unit contribution margin is 18. So to break even, I would need to sell 12,000 units. And we knew that they were selling 15,000 here, so that makes sense that they have to sell less because right now they have a $54,000 profit, right? So contribution margin ratio, remember contribution margin ratio, I could do the contribution margin over the sales, which could be the 18 divided by the 30 or the 270 divided by the 450. That would give me the same ratio, right? And so fixed expenses again is the 216,000 divided by the ratio. Let's find that ratio equals 18 divided by 30. It's a 60% ratio. So that means this is 100%. 100%. I found this ratio. I could also find this ratio by dividing the 12 divided by the 30. We normally seek for the contribution margin ratio as opposed to the variable expense ratio, but it's good to know. And my ratio is going to be the 60%. So I will divide my 216,000 divided by 60%, and they're going to need to make $360,000 of sales. I could check that figure if I wanted to, right? So sales are going to be this amount. Remember that my variable expenses are going to be 40% of my sales. And then I could do this minus this, assuming this was within the relevant range. Fixed expenses are 216,000, and it does look like I am breaking even. So with that many units, the 12,000 units at $30 per unit, I'd be making $360 worth of sales. So we answered number 1. Number 2, so number 1 would be the 12,000 units, the 360,000 sales. Number 2, where our contribution margin would have to equal 216,000 in order to break even using no computations. How many units would have to be sold for a target profit of 90,000? So remember our formula. Now it's fixed expenses and I can copy this in case you want to keep that for later. Right, so it's fixed expenses plus a target profit of 90,000. So I'll add that in there, divided by our unit contribution margin, our unit contribution ratio, our contribution margin ratio, excuse me. So again, that's the fixed expenses plus your target profit, 90,000. And so now I'm going to need to make 17,000 units or sell, not make them, sell them, and 510,000 sales dollars. Does it say, oh, verify that using a statement? So let's verify that. That's fine. I can do that. This is the amount per unit. We're going to times this by the number of units. Minus those two. Fixed expenses are the 216. And am I going to make a profit of 90,000? That's what I'm trying to check here. And it is looking like I'm making a profit of 90,000 or net operating income of 90,000. And again, you could see this is 510,000 worth of sales dollars. So that does work out there. Okay, moving on. Refer to the original data, compute the company's margin of safety in both dollars and percentages. So margin of safety is margin of safety. We could go back to our PowerPoint and go back a few slides. Margin of safety equals total sales dollars minus break-even sales. Break-even sales we knew was going to be $360,000. So total sales, original sales, they said, refer to the original data, minus break-even sales. We calculated that previously. And so my margin of safety would be $90,000. So it'll take a loss of $90,000 in sales to start losing money and not having a profit. You would have a loss instead. It says both dollars. So this is the dollar amount of margin of safety. If I wanted a percentage, refer back to the PowerPoint on that margin of safety in dollars divided by the budgeted or actual sales in dollars. So I found that 90,000, I would take that 90,000 margin of safety in dollars divided by total sales, which would be the 450,000. And so my percentage of margin of safety, make that a percentage, is 20% margin of safety. And so that 20% can give investors a little bit of comfort that they have a margin of safety, that this company is profitable and they have a little bit of leeway. But not as high as our previous one, which was about 45%. Number 5, what is the company's contribution margin ratio? If sales increase by 50% per month and there is no change in fixed expenses, how much would you expect net operating income to increase? So you could calculate this by using the degree of operating leverage. Remember, and I don't think the answer solution does that, the degree of operating leverage is our contribution margin divided by our net operating income. Our degree of operating leverage, this amount divided by this amount. So we have a nice even 5 degree of operating leverage of 5. So if our sales increased by a specific percentage, it went up by 50,000. So that didn't tell me a specific percentage per se. So you could solve for a percentage change between the 450,000 to the 500,000, right? Because it's a $50,000 change, which I could do for you. But let's do. I think they're trying to get at the contribution margin ratio. We have this ratio of 60%. If our sales go up by 50,000, right, we have a contribution margin ratio of 60%. That would mean our contribution margin would increase by timesing these two. So our contribution margin should increase by 30,000. And we could see that if we made a new income statement. These are our percentages. We're going up by $50,000. So it's 40 and 60. We're going up by, well, this is 500,000 because we went up by 50,000. Right, And so we would increase our contribution margin by by 30,000 because it was normally 270. It goes up to 300,000 if we have the same fixed expenses. Our net operating income would increase to 84,000, so increase to a full 30,000 there.